This is your sign. You are on a path that is as unique as anyone else's, and you are allowed to be on it. Welcome back to Sweet Infinity. My name is Kieran. I'm on a 30-day challenge to read one card from one of my tarot decks or oracle decks and discuss it with you, and I hope it resonates for you. So today I'm going to be reading from this deck called The Tarot of the Divine. This is a beautiful deck, and it comes with a guidebook. This is a very unique deck. So the tarot itself has a long multicultural history, and some of it is shrouded in mystery, but most likely the tarot, the set of cards that we know today as the tarot, came from China or Far East Asia and went through what's now Egypt into what's Europe, and in Italy sometime in the 1400s it became known as what we now call tarot. But the cards have existed, and the kind of imagery and symbology that's on there have existed in other cultures, including ancient Egypt and China and many places in the middle like Persia. So in this deck, what's really cool about it is that there's imagery. This is also a non-traditional tarot deck, which means what's become the traditional tarot deck is more of a European Rider-Waite system. But I actually really like non-traditional decks because they get to explore different artists' interpretation. And in this deck particularly, it's by Yoshi Yoshitani. That's the person who created the deck. This person is very creative in interpreting each card by using mythology, folklore, tales, stories from all over the world, from traditions and cultures all over the world. It says, I'm going to read you the description, inspired by deities, folklore, and fairy tales from around the world. And on the back it says, the path to enlightenment is unique for each of us, but many of the lessons we learn are shared stories passed among cultures and generations. Tarot of the Divine brings traditional tarot archetypes to life with a lustrous series of fables, including The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, The Crane Wife, Sleeping Beauty, King Arthur, and the stories of many lesser-known legends and deities from all over the world. Just as the tarot provides ways to interpret the world around us, so too do these illuminating folk tales. So I really absolutely adore this deck. Comes with a pretty decent guidebook with color imagery, and there is another book that has more detailed explanations of each card. I don't have one of those yet, but I plan on getting that someday. And the cards themselves are also just lovely. They have a great texture to them. The artwork is unique and represents a different story from a different culture and from all over the world. You have the Fool card, which is represented as the Little Mermaid, the Three of Wands. So each of these cards represents a folk tale or a story within the mythology of different cultures and somehow relates to the actual original meaning of the card. So, for example, the Little Mermaid, let's just use that. Now, the Little Mermaid story is about a character who is very young and naive and ends up getting herself into a lot of trouble trying to look for an adventure of love and all that. That's the Fool card, right? Yoshi Yoshitani, who created this deck, just did an amazing job of going through all of the different legends of the world and indigenous culture, African, Asian, ancient, and modern for that matter, and going through and finding various stories, myths, and folk tales, and just positioning them with whichever card is most relevant to that kind of story, most resonates or synchronizes. And if you go through the whole deck and you go through all the stories and legends that are covered, there's just a whole world of shared human story from all over the world. It's really amazing because it's like a treasure trove of myths and stories. Like this card is represented by this Aladdin, and this is the card Seven of Cups, which generally means something about wishful thinking, living in your dream kind of thing, where you just have wishes and you don't really do much to try to get them, or you try to find shortcuts. So this card is represented by Aladdin, which again very relevant, I think. So I'm going to shuffle this deck and pick a card, and then we can go over it. I hope you're enjoying the series that I'm doing. I plan on expanding to other types of content here. I would love to hear your feedback, any comments that you have, what you like, or what else you want to see. I was thinking of doing something where I actually do a longer reading, where I do a spread and I can read for different purposes. So let me know if that's the kind of stuff that you might be interested in, or I can do a deep dive into different decks and go through each card in a deck and explain it or show you up close what each card is like. All right, so let's pick a card for today. And please remember to subscribe and like this video and share it if you know anyone who might be into stories, mythology, things like that. Okay, so the card for today is the Wheel of Fortune. Now this card, the Wheel of Fortune, is a very interesting card. It's part of the Major Arcana. The Major Arcana is where the tarot includes a lot of concepts and images that are part of what Carl Jung would have called archetypes, the sort of big themes of life, big concepts, philosophical concepts. And sometimes it can be hard to understand because it can be very abstract. And this is one of those that is kind of abstract. Now, in this deck, the artist, the author, has shown this card as represented by the mythological figure called Anansi. And I'll read you the description from the booklet. Anansi, the Wheel of Fortune, from Ghana, Akan mythology, Akan. The Wheel of Fortune is endlessly turning, spun by a trickster god. What was once luck is now misfortune. What was hopeless is now joyous. These acts may seem random, but all fates are part of an interconnected web of repercussions. Another description that I reference sometimes says that the Wheel of Fortune is about the inevitable nature of change. This card reminds us that whatever we are going through will eventually change, and that it is not possible to control all aspects of life. In a traditional tarot deck, there's actually a Wheel of Fortune. So while the outer ring of the wheel is always turning, the center is always still, symbolizing how we can deal with the uncertainty of life by finding our own calm center and staying grounded in the present moment. Often this card appears as an invitation to shift the current energy by doing something different. And this is from the Galaxy Tarot app. So I just want to give credit where it's due. Now, in this deck, this card is represented by this trickster deity called Anansi. I don't know that much about this particular mythological character, but I do know that a lot of these trickster deities and trickster figures in mythology are meant to symbolize that sort of randomness of life, things that are just out of our control. And this card in particular is about how up to a certain point we have a certain agency in life, but we also are in some ways subject to the whims of, you may call it fate, you may call it destiny, and you may call it randomness or luck or anything else. But there is an aspect of that. And this card is a reminder of that. And also, for me, it's always been a reminder that when things are up, they can also come back down. And when things are down, they can also go back up, right? A way to remember during the good times not to take things for granted, not to get complacent, and understand that just because something is good doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And in the bad times, or if something is hard, to also remember that things are going to change. And ultimately, this card is about change, and it's about understanding that everything changes. And today we're living in a world where everything is changing very, very fast. There are people who seem to not be able to deal with change. Like the world is changing, the whole board game of world powers is changing. And I feel like a lot of people are just having a hard time accepting that. A lot of people are expecting things to remain the same as they have the last few hundred years. And to me, this card also is about accepting that places like Africa and Asia and South America, these are emerging and becoming places that are more and more autonomous, where the people are more and more sovereign, more and more able to exercise dignified self-determination that was denied to them for many centuries. And Anansi, this trickster creature, is sometimes he can be very playful. Let's put it that way. But he can also teach you a lesson that you might not want to learn. And I think some people are going to have to learn to embrace that change, that maybe they are used to a particular kind of worldview where certain people, certain countries are on top and other ones are always on the bottom. And if things shift, then they don't necessarily know how to deal with that. But this card reminds us that it's okay because we are all part of the same wheel. So if you can learn to accept the wholeness and look at things from a holistic standpoint, you can also be glad that somebody who was on the bottom gets a chance to not be on the bottom anymore. That people who are now able to exercise a self-determination after centuries of abuse and exploitation are able to do that because the wheel is turning. Maybe you could meet at the middle somewhere. That is a good lesson because we should never think that anything is in stone. And this also applies to if you're in a bad situation or you're down on your luck, that this can also work in your favor. There's a quote by Mark Twain that I really love that says, "I'm a writer because I want to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable." And I feel like that's a perfect embodiment of trickster energy. This is a trickster who wants to make sure that anyone who thinks that they will have good luck forever, that they can just keep getting away with it, especially if it comes at the expense of others, that's not sustainable, that's not gonna last. And anyone who is just down on their luck and feels hopeless, well, there is hope for you. So I feel like this is a card that is about balancing that kind of inequality that exists in this world. And it's constantly shifting. And that's part of life. That's part of the wheel of fortune. And to just kind of be aware of that gives you a wisdom and dignity that allows you to get through life, including all of the other parts, so that when you are having good luck or having prosperity or having things that others don't have, you can be humble. And when you are down on your luck and you're having hard times, you can also be wiser and understand that there might be something else that you are not seeing that is more valuable and that you can hold on to. Like that center of the wheel, you can hold on to the understanding that that's how life works and try to be a better person so that you will have a sense of dignity that will protect you, integrity that will protect you. Because there are a lot of people who, when they're up, they just completely forget about everything and they just go wild. And we are seeing the results of that in this world, I think. I think that that's a very, very toxic trait. And Anansi doesn't like that. Fate doesn't like that. Fate doesn't like hubris and arrogance and too much pride and greed. So for me, this card is about remembering what's up will be down, what's down will be up. It's always been that way, and it always will. So be humble no matter what, and be centered and be balanced. That's the message of this card. This deck is just a very powerful deck. I have many decks, and this is one of my favorites, which is hard for me to say, but it really is. There's so much wisdom in this deck. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope that this stimulated some thoughts in you that might be useful down the road for you too. I would love to hear from you. Was there anything in here that moved you? Please share, like, subscribe. I would love it if you would share this video with someone who you think could hear this message. Stick around. I'll be back with another video. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.